Morning, everyone. Right, welcome to the Education Committee, August 2024. Hope everyone's enjoyed their summer break. I'm not sure with the Scottish weather that it's been particularly enjoyable for us all. And so, just continue and ask. So, any apologies for absence at all?
No apologies given.
Councillor Devlin, yeah. Thank you. I was also just want to mention that the meeting is being recorded and a copy of the recording will be made available on the Council's YouTube channel following the meeting. And ask now for any declarations of interest. None? Great, thank you. And we'll move on then to the third item, and it's an SQA verbal update, and I believe this is from Janice. Thanks, Janice.
Thank you, Convener. Once again, pupils across East Renfrewshire have performed very well across all key measures, with another year of fantastic exam results. The attainment of the young people of East Renfrewshire attracts much publicity, and their performance in 2024 SQA examination results was no different, especially as this year we saw record levels of performance in S5. Although 2022 saw the return to formal assessment following the necessity to cancel exams in 2020 and the employment of an alternative approach to assessment in 2021, there remained additional measures to support the recovery of learning and teaching while maintaining standards. This included coursework and exams for some practical subjects being removed temporarily. This year there were no such measures, with a return of full course assessment in National 5, Higher and Advanced Higher courses. Nationally, research has demonstrated the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on learning for all pupils, and particularly for the most of our disadvantaged learners. Committee will be aware that our S4 learners in 2023-2024 were the year group that did not finish Primary 7, have a transition to secondary school, and then missed a significant part of S1 when schools closed once again. It is therefore testament to their dedication and resilience that we are able to recognise their achievements this morning. As well as a special mention to S4, we've continued to raise attainment with record-breaking performance in higher and very strong advanced higher results. These achievements are a tribute to the hard work and commitments of pupils and the collective efforts and support of their parents and school staff. We will be providing a more detailed look at the results with our annual presentation focus on performance, but I wish to report a few particular highlights at this stage. 96% of S4 pupils achieve 5 or more qualifications at National 4 or better. This is broadly similar to the result last year. At National 5 and S4, 77% of our cohort achieved 5 or more awards. It should be noted that in 2019, the last time a full course assessment was in place, 78% of the cohort achieved in this way. It should also be noted that at the time, 2019 was our best ever result. Merscastle High School learners achieved their second highest proportion, achieving 5 or more National 5 passes in S4, an increase of 2.9% from 2019. In East Renfrewshire, the quality of awards continues to rise. Incredibly, of the 10,471 young people in S4 presented for a National 5 award in East Renfrewshire, 61%, it wasn't 10,000 that were presented at the award, sorry, National 5 awards in East Renfrewshire, 61% received A grades, an increase from pre-pandemic rates of 2019, where we had a 54% rate. At higher level, performance of S5 pupils were once again very strong across all measures. 84% of the original roll achieved 1 or more hires, 71% attained 3 or more hires, and 52% attained 5 or more hires. As previously mentioned, this is the authority's best ever result at S5. St Luke's High School and St Ninian's High School learners increased the proportion of 3 or more and 5 or more hires in S5 compared to last year. Wood Farm and Williamwood High schools achieved outstanding best ever S5 results with an increase of 5% and 10% respectively, and young people achieving 5 or more hires at this stage. Barhead High School learners achieved the second highest proportion of 5 or more passes at higher in S5 at 27%. This is a remarkable 7% increase on the last year of full course assessment in 2019. Notably, in 2024, there was an increase in the proportion of S5 boys achieving 5 or more hires, with 45%, the best we've had for over 6 years. 50% of the S5 pupils presented at higher level achieved an A grade, an increase from 46% in 2019, when there was the last full course assessment. Eastwood High school learners achieved the proportion of 3 or more and 5 or more higher passes, increased that proportion of 3 or more or 5 or more higher passes by the end of S6 compared to the previous year. And at Advanced Higher in S6, the performance across the authority was strong at 42%. These are just some of the highlights. However, it demonstrates that continued ambitions and improvement in that culture and commitment across the education department, our schools, to continually aim higher and deliver for all of our pupils. At a future education committee, we will provide a fuller presentation looking in detail at performance for key equity groups. I would like to express my sincere thanks to all pupils, parents and staff for their vital contributions, and all should be congratulated on the achievements of our young people. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Janice. Yes, and there'll be some great results there, some very significant statistics, especially the recovery. You know, it's been a very difficult time period for so many of the young people, and to hear that, you know, certain cohorts have managed to get through that and beyond it, and, you know, and achieved some significant results. It's great to see that. I'm really looking forward to obviously seeing the in-depth look, you know, and when we actually see the individual figures to dig deeper. So I'll ask for any other comments from any other members at all. No. Sorry, Councillor O'Donnell.
Janice, that was an awful lot of data and a verbal update, but congratulations to the department, all the staff and pupils for an amazing set of results, particularly in S4, given the difficulties that they went through in Primary 7 and Primary 1, which you alluded to. That's pretty remarkable and shows the resilience of the children, but also the focus of staff and teachers and the education department to make sure they were not left behind. So that's fantastic. Also to see the S5 results at best ever, pretty incredible. And great to see, you know, and we have to commend the department for this. You know, once again, national leadership on performance of our children in exams. So well done. Really great effort, and these things don't happen by chance. So really appreciate the work you've all put into this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Oh, sorry, I thought Councillor Laws had your reasons for being on glass. I thought you were actually any other comments? Councillor Buchanan.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Again, just to note the excellent results that we've received that our children have managed to obtain during what has been a very challenging and difficult time. So it's great to see that continuous improvement. I think that's credit to not just the children, but to our staff and teachers across education, ensuring that we get that delivery and that continuous improvement. And I think it's noticeable that our S4s have done particularly well given the circumstances, particularly when you look at the SQA changes coming in line with the outcomes and the still ongoing issues of the pandemic and how the impacts that has had. But I think great results there as well, and that highlights the huge amount of work that's been done post-pandemic to try and get those children ready for the exams. So a credit to everyone involved in that, and in particular the children, for the difficulties that they faced again. So excellent results, and long may it continue.
Thank you, Councillor Buchanan. Other comments, I believe. But yes, absolutely, just to echo that. It's just great to hear that it's doing so well. So thanks very much, Janice. I believe the next paper is the draft literacy and English strategy update 24-27. That's yourself again.
Thank you, Convener. The purpose of this report is to update Education Committee on the evaluation undertaken by the Education Department's previous literacy strategy and seek approval for the refreshed literacy and English strategy 24-27. That's easier said than not. Education Committee approved in June 2017 the Education Department's literacy strategy, which outlined the ambition for all children and young people within the context of literacy. The strategy identified 6 key aims over a 3-year period and set clear actions for the department, early learning childcare settings, schools and adult services to undertake in order to deliver these aims. The Education Department planned a review of the impact and progress of the strategy during session 2021. However, the COVID-19 global pandemic interrupted these plans. Using a collaborative improvement visit model, the review was rescheduled for session 23-24. Paragraphs 9 and 10 of the report outlines the process used to gather evidence for the review. Appendix 1, which is page 7 of your papers, details the findings of the review and the review team identifying strengths and areas for improvement. They also recommended a refreshed literacy strategy to be agreed and implemented to drive these improvements. Some of the key strengths included the very strong attainment across all sectors, with evidence showing clear added value from schools in terms of literacy and English, the continual increase of adult learners engaging with a range of learner-centred programmes, the impact of literacy interventions which supported children well. Children and young people in East Renfrewshire want to do well in their learning. In almost all play spaces and classes, they are motivated and engaged in their learning, and the relationships between staff and pupils are extremely positive. Increasing evidence that practitioners in ELC and primary settings are using real-life context, building in learners' interests and skillfully making connections across the curriculum to provide relevance. The quality of professional learning that has been delivered as part of the strategy and how that's having a positive impact on learners' experiences. The review also highlighted areas for improvement and next steps, and these include the need to continue to prioritise reducing inequalities and closing the attainment gap in our next strategy, with a particular focus on specific key equity groups, and the need for consistency for all learners, class to class, school to school, to achieve those marginal gains required to continue to raise the bar for all. It should be noted, as described in page 11 of your papers, Table 1, that the key performance indicators from the previous strategy were not met. However, I would encourage Education Committee not to disregard the impact of the strategy, as midway through the implementation the global pandemic struck and not all activities were progressed. We know from national research and local evidence that attainment and attendance were just 2 of the many factors impacted by the pandemic. However, looking at attainment data for 23-24, it would suggest that our rate of recovery was based on the strong foundations put in place by this previous strategy. Thus, our literacy attainment levels have matched and in many cases exceeded pre-pandemic levels this year. We continually strive to improve outcomes and experiences for all our learners, and as such the refreshed strategy is based using the key recommendations of the review, with 3 key themes for improvement being identified: pedagogy, progress and partnerships. Pages 26, 27, 28 of your papers provides further details of the key activities the Department will undertake under these themes. Education Committee is asked to note the continued progress of the delivery of literacy in English and comment on the contents as outlined in this paper. Committee is also asked to approve the new literacy and English strategy for 24-27. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Janice. And one word that occurred to me that we were talking about earlier and reviewing the papers about the whole process was rigorous. I think that's the one thing that the whole process that's been followed here with the putting the strategy together for the future. So first of all, we're asked to note the continued progress and comment on the contents as outlined in the paper. Do we have any? Councillor Brydon?
Thanks, Janice, for this report, and I appreciate that the last strategy was impacted by the pandemic, and of course things couldn't progress maybe as we had hoped. It was just on page 15 of the overall papers. It mentions a secondary school questionnaire about English and how those figures are down from 84% in 2018 to 68% who enjoyed learning English. understand there's always been a perception that English is hard, especially at higher level, and for those that will take advanced higher as well. And it said it mentions in almost all the classes observed, pupils were engaged, but obviously there was maybe a class or two that pupils weren't engaged in. I presume professional learning has been offered to that teacher, or how do we ensure that all learners doing all hires or advanced hires, or even Nat 4, National 5, have the same experience? And I think it is about professional learning, so it's just, if you have any more thoughts on that. I know there has always been a perception about English, and a lot of it is very assignment based, and can be seen as maybe not as fun as the rest of the subjects, but what more can we do? And it was just, hopefully, those who were involved in the observation were given support, if that was the case.
So there's a couple of things I think, it's very disappointing, the percentage, and that was across all our secondary schools. I think the part though that when the team were going in to review experiences, it didn't necessarily match the children's views. So right away, I know we try and triangulate, but right away there's further questions to be asked. Our 7 secondary principal teachers of English meet throughout the year with the support of the department, and the analysis of the questionnaire was part of their agenda in May. The officer who led on this review and the strategy is actually the link for that department as well. So there has been questions about why are children disengaged is maybe too much, but why are they not liking the particular style of learning and teaching in English? And you're correctly that it's professional learning, but I wouldn't say it wasn't one teacher. It was more the collective questionnaires. I think the other thing that sometimes there is a real, when I think of the timing of the questionnaire and the review, most young people were about to embark on study leave, about to sit, there was a lot of revision, so there might not have been as much active learning as, however, that's not an excuse. We are still going to follow that up. We have got individual results for schools, and in fact I was in one of the schools yesterday and we spoke about that and all the things that can happen. So it's not that we print the figure, there will definitely be professional learning and follow-up to go, but as I say, the experiences observed did not necessarily match what the young people were telling us, and whatever reason that is, we're exploring that further.
Obviously, 2 early learning centres were observed, several, I can't remember the exact secondary settings were observed, and primary settings. I take it these were spread across the authority, different demographics, different SIMD, just to have a balanced approach.
Yeah, the sample is sort of representative of the whole authority, so they were spread about. There was also a bit about being proportionate, because you'll be aware that a lot of our schools were inspected by Education Scotland last year as well, so there's a bit about, would it be appropriate, and I'm sure Des as our trade union representative would like a dialogue about that, but would it be appropriate to go in and observe again, because there is, although I do think observation and reviews and inspection does bring about improvement, it has to be proportionate. So the sample was taken into consideration our own previous quality assurance calendar, that of Education Scotland, but also so that we had a mix across sectors and indeed demographics.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Buchanan? Oh, and then Councillor Merrick.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think it's great to see this back on the agenda again and the refresh paper coming forward, because we know it is critical in the whole learning process and ensuring that that is going forward. But what I'm particularly pleased about is the recognition in terms of adult literacy as well. It's not just our children and young people, but the prevention aspect, particularly in our ELC centres where we have parents going in, some of the parents improving their literacy and reading to children and working with the children. And that in itself is a great prevention measure, because that takes us through, it encourages the children and helps with their literacy, but it also supports the adults as well. And I think going forward, that's one of the critical aspects, particularly in certain demographic areas. And that ensures that going forward, we have that prevention mechanism in place to try and ensure that in future years, we hopefully the numbers will be reduced, and that literacy learning and that continuous improvement will hopefully continue to benefit. And I know that that's going on in most of our early learning centres, and indeed early learning centres across the country. But it's a huge piece of work, and I think it's right that that's recognised and that we continue to monitor it. So well done.
Thank you, Councillor Buchanan. Councillor Merrick, did you, and then Councillor Wallace?
Thanks, convener. Thanks for the report, Janet. Janice, it's follows the theme of education reports. It's honest, it's realistic, and that continuous improvement that always threads through the whole department. So thank you for that. I was going to ask a question about how the strategy specifically, how does it support the diverse needs of our learners, including people with additional support needs and from different linguistic backgrounds? If that's the question, I'm going to talk a wee bit more after that, if that's okay.
And Siobhan, maybe can
So within the strategy, there is that focus on professional learning and upskilling staff, and a large part of that is around the support we give for children with additional support needs. Region Recovery being one of the examples of a really effective intervention in terms of supporting children who need that little bit extra support and help, but also upskilling staff. There's a wide range of professional learning linked to all aspects of literacy in English. Also looking at pedagogy and teaching approaches to make sure they are inclusive of all children. And I suppose part of that links in then to the social justice framework and that idea around curriculum, and as the curriculum representative of the children and young people who are sitting in front of the class teachers. So thinking about resources that are used, context for learning, so children can see themselves in the resources and the lessons that are being produced. It also then links in closely thinking about our sort of bilingual work and support for children with English as an additional language. So again, it's around sort of teacher confidence and being able to meet needs there, understanding the sort of pedagogy behind how children with English as an additional language learn and the best supports to put in place in that. And a large part of that is around professional learning again for teachers, but also for pupil support staff in terms of offering that support and ensuring that the resources in place are appropriate resources. So we have developed a professional learning programme for both teachers and pupil support assistants, and that was really positively evaluated in terms of any sessions that were offered last year, and we're continuing to offer that programme again this year to support upskilling staff.
Thanks, Siobhan. Sorry, thanks, Siobhan. What I was going to, the story I was going to tell was about just before the summer holidays. I know that probably seems like 2 years ago, but just before the schools broke up in June, I was involved in helping the Speakers Club and their contribution to some of the debates that go on in the schools. And that's where we're on page 18, you talk about collaboration. I was able to see that in real life. The quality of the debating from all the kids in general, but it's not just East Renfrewshire children, there's children outside, wider than that, but from East Renfrewshire it was stunning, absolutely brilliant. Some of these kids then went on to the finals in Glasgow City Chambers. I know that. I don't know exactly what happened at that point. But the heats were really, really good. And what was terrific was the graciousness with which the losers, if you like, congratulated the winners, and that the kids were constantly seeking improvement. They were coming up, what could we have done differently? How could we improve? You know, to do almost running out of ideas for them. But it was it's just one of those examples of that, which is perhaps some of the biggest skills we need going forward. Not the usual malarkey we hear on the TV.
No, I think oracy is a life skill, and I think that's something that the new strategy will certainly be building upon. So I'm glad that you experienced that.
Terrific.
Really? It's not picked up,
Thank you, Councillor Merrick. Do you have any? And Councillor Wallace, once you're finished. I believe you wanted to come in, Councillor Wallace.
Yes, thank you. Just looking at some of the background information on this, and it's in reference on page 23. It refers to the national response to improving literacy, and this is where there's supposed to be a focus on critical thinking within reading and writing, and yet nowhere in our strategy do I see any reference to critical thinking. And I think in these days it's becoming, I would suggest, more important than ever. We've got various reports on TV. We can see what's been happening down south. And there's one thing, you listen to reports on mainstream media. Some people purport that to be propaganda, others purport it to be truth. And also we get the bipolar feeds that we get on social media. And my feeling is that there's, and I would suggest that Curriculum for Excellence and one thing is perhaps squeezed out this critical thinking, and I would really like to see if there's something we can do with our own strategy to make sure that our young people, contrary to what Councillor Merritt mentioned on, and I recognise what he's saying about the debates that have been happening, which should suggest that it's been some very good critical thinking perhaps going on, but and if there can be some way that we can actually improve and strengthen that and try and instill that in our own strategy. As I say, I think it's more important than ever that we can strengthen our own young people in that skill. Thanks.
If I maybe draw your attention back to our local improvement plan, and in particular you'll realise that a big part of that is how our children learn. And the strategy will talk about pedagogical practice, but it will not detail that. But critical thinking is essential for literacy skills. If you think about even reading a novel, you evaluate, you form an opinion, you infer, you predict, you rationalise. So all of these skills are directly taught. But what you'll find in our sort of skills framework, it will talk about higher order reading skills. It will talk about, and they'll be about opportunities. So we do teach in that holistic way, but the strategy being a high level would not talk about specific skills the same way it doesn't talk about specific writing skills, whatever. But the local improvement plan, the professional learning and everything that goes alongside that, and I would actually argue that Curriculum for Excellence is actually based on that more open-ended and critical thinking approach, is very much what you will see in our classrooms, and thankfully Councillor Merrick's seen the outcome of that in terms of the debating. So you're right that we would not necessarily reference a particular skill, but hopefully you would see that sort of holistic way and the different associated ways that we teach our children. And I think actually the strategy does talk about, our local improvement plan talks about children learning how to learn. And that's something quite specific, that learning behaviour, which takes away from that instant social media, that questioning things, that understanding themselves as learners first. And that's very much a huge pillar of the Education Department's approach to learning and teaching and curriculum at the moment.
If I just come back on that, taking everything you're saying there, it's just the concern is that we have, it's referred to National Response to Improving Literacy document, and yet we don't have a specific reference to it within our strategy. Although I do take in what you're saying, it doesn't necessarily mean that no critical thinking, teaching or learning in that is not taking place. Just, I think I would like to see it actually referred to within our strategy and how we're actually dealing with it. Okay, is that fair? Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace. I think that was noted. Janice, Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks very much, Janice. And following on from some of the themes raised by Councillor Merrick and Councillor Buchanan, first of all, it's a very honest assessment, and it's welcome for that in terms of the previous strategy and what we're going to do going forward. One specific question, if I could then come back with a separate one. It refers to council-wide approach to literacy development. If I can find the reference to it. I was just wondering what that actually meant. It was underneath partnerships. It was the first bullet point on page 10.
I think that we're talking about from a 3 to 18 approach. We're talking about, we are aware that some of our partners may be leading sort of book bug, all these sorts of things. So it's about, our previous strategy made that commitment about improving literacy as a council, as a community, not just as an education department. So part of it refers to that. We are very conscious that we don't want to take away that individual skill and critique of teachers that approach things in different ways. However, there has to be a standard. So it also refers to a standard of this is what a very effective reading lesson would include. This is what a very effective writing lesson. So there's a wee bit of both that it refers to, but also talks about, for example, our DYW partners, when young folk are filling in, that we are teaching the same way. We're building that foundation and those strengths, and that building on, that's how children learn. And dare I say, that critical thinking.
Great. Thanks, Kira. Thanks, Janice. The next point follows on from that, and actually follows on from some of the equality issues that were sort of raised. I'm wondering, looking at the key performance indicators, are we missing something here in terms of our early learning children, and particularly for vulnerable groups? You know, we talked about English as a second language, immigrant groups, young boys in Q1 and Q2, quintiles Q1 and Q2, and for support for those families that perhaps are not used themselves to being read to as babies and children. Is there something sort of missing there of that sort of capturing it early? You mentioned book bug, a big part of this, that we should be sort of targeting and measuring.
Yeah, through our integrated children's services, we work very closely with health visiting and to name just one partnership, and it is about those opportunities for children to be aware of literacy all around them, building on that Odyssey. We do need to do something specifically about boys, and that's why that will feature quite strongly in the sort of professional learning offer. Based on research, we know that we take a professional inquiry approach. We look at what can we do to engage boys, but I think that the sort of, although I'm aware of 23-24 data, I think the disappointment is that where we have bucked the trend in many local authorities, I think when it comes to literacy and COVID, our most disadvantaged learners have been impacted the same as everyone else, and I think it's that Odyssey from a young age. We were talking with the convener earlier, there's many social factors, there's many cultural factors, but getting parents and those adults around to be good role models and talking and listening just as a start would be it, and that sense of wonder around them. So we are aware of research, but you are right, we need to do more. We're not doing enough.
Thanks for that. So perhaps for another iteration, could we consider that, you know, what's the measurable, so that we know that we're progressing and
I would be happy to bring back, even like we have before, spotlights on some of the things that we will be starting to do this year in terms of gender and those young folk who are not surrounded by literacy.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
I think it's a really helpful point, Councillor O'Donnell. I suppose what I would say in terms of those indicators that we've set out in the strategy on page 30, we're always trying to strike a balance between having a sort of reasonable number, but then making sure that our approach drills down. So although we've got the percentage of pupils P1, P4 and P7 combined looking at literacy, Janice and the team will look at reading separately, they'll look at writing separately, they'll look at individual year groups separately, they'll then break that down in terms of different equity factors. So you mentioned, you know, it could be gender, it could be those from a different particular ethnic background. We could end up with, huge numbers of targets. I suppose what I would give you is that just that reassurance that in order for us to achieve those, we'll require that kind of marginal gains, that total rigorous approach that the convener spoke about, and that's but we've tried to summarise it into kind of a couple of key ones where we've got the overall literacy levels and then we've got the equity one, because that, I guess, is the one nationally we've focused on, or in terms of SIMD, but we can then report back. You'll have seen that it includes the baseline, so there's some of those early years measures, but you can be assured that we will continue to turn over all of those areas to look at that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. I don't know. So it's noted that your suggestion about the potential spotlight is something that we can bring back to add further to the discussion. Is there any other comments from members at all? No. I think the one thing ultimately, when you look at the strategy and the aims for improvement, there are several there, but ultimately we're trying to provide all learners at all ages, including adult learning. Councillor Cannon touched on it, but this employability of the skills, so that they are given what they require to go out there, and and you talked about the learning to learn. There's also the joy of learning. It's just instilling that into anyone really at any point, and literacy obviously is a key part of it. My final comment is I noted that your use of alliteration, was it, Janice? PP&P? What was it again, sorry? The
Pedagogy, progress and partnership.
Which apparently is one of the key things that's in there as well as part of the strategy. The teachers are nodding their heads, former teachers. Thanks for that. So yes, we were asked to note the continued progress, I believe, and comment. We've done that rigorously, and also approve the new draft with English literacy and English strategy. If they're happy to do so. Yeah, great. Thank you. Excellent. Okay, so we'll move on then to our next paper, Standard Circular 57, Child Protection, and I believe this is Siobhan. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. The purpose of this report is to seek Education Committee approval for the revised Standard Circular 57, Child Protection, which provides guidance on child protection in East Renfrewshire early learning and childcare settings in schools. Education Committee will note that it's not always deemed appropriate to bring updated standard circulars to committee for approval. However, given the importance of child protection and the fact that all staff within education settings have a duty of care to ensure that children and young people are protected from abuse, neglect and exploitation, we felt it was important to share this update with you today. The updated standard circular provides the current national context which surrounds child protection, including the promise, getting it right for every child, and the UNCRC Incorporation Scotland Act 2024. It's been updated following the National Child Protection Guidance publication, and while much of the standard circular remains the same, changes that have been made include increased reference to updated GIRFEC refresh, importance of child's voice is embedded throughout it, links are made now to whole family wellbeing and the importance of taking in the whole family when considering child protection, a focus on strength-based language, children's rights, as we've mentioned, is embedded throughout, and the language of keeping the promise has been updated throughout it. It details the procedures and actions to be taken when there are concerns relating to the care and welfare of a child or children and the potential risk to their well-being, and it highlights the importance of close partnership working with parents and carers and relevant agencies such as social work, police, health services and the Scottish Children's Reporter Administration. Staff working in educational settings are provided with advice in key areas, including definitions of child abuse, roles and responsibilities, referral and recording procedures, safeguarding, children missing from education, information sharing, partnership working, as I've mentioned, professional learning and monitoring procedures. So Education Committee is asked to approve and comment on the revised Standard Circular 57 Child Protection and ask the Director of Education to take appropriate steps to ensure its implementation in all schools in early learning and childcare settings. Thank you.
Thank you, Siobhan. Sorry, just before Councillor Franklin, you come in terms of, I'm just checking that everyone is aware of what a standard circular is in the context of, have we been nodding or? Well, I think it would be more appropriate from someone from the Education Department to explain. And you'll realise, well, this obviously is quite a significant one, which is why it's been brought to us, but I don't think it's very common for these to come to committees. So if someone could briefly just give us the context.
The Education Department will have a range of standard circulars, which are essentially guidance and policies that all our schools and early learning and childcare establishments follow. Most of those, as you would imagine, are operational to ensure that kind of consistency that Janice was talking about. But as Siobhan said in introduction, this one we felt was significantly important, given the need to make sure that that leadership and that governance at all levels is aware of the importance of this. So we bring this one, convener.
Thank you, Mark. So hopefully that just, I thought it was, because it doesn't occur that often, and as Mark said, it's so a lot of the time it's operational, but whereas the significance of this one, I'm sure you agree, is acknowledgeable. So I'll ask for any comments then, Councillor Pride.
Thanks, Siobhan, for bringing this to our attention. Child protection is, of course, so important, and it's important that staff in all our education settings know what to do in the event a child is like this. I just want to say personally, I've witnessed via care experienced children how fantastic some of our head teachers have been. I know in particular one of our primary head teachers was fantastic, given the feedback that I had from my parents who are foster carers, how fantastic they were at dealing with issues of child protection. I know, Siobhan, that you and Raymond, our Chief Social Work Officer, chair a joint group. But I was just wondering, of course, partnership is mentioned throughout this report, which is really appreciated and really important, but has this been discussed at that group prior to this coming to Education Committee?
Yep. So following the national publication, we worked as a Child Protection Committee to look at the national guidance and look at East Renfrewshire as a whole, as a children's service partnership, in terms of our guidance and procedures, and have updated the wider East Renfrewshire guidance. That's in the process of just being finalised at the moment, but we were really keen to then update the education standards circular and get that out to settings and schools, just given how important it is. We did work with colleagues in HSCP around taking not just the national one, but then the East Renfrewshire Council guidance and incorporating that into the Education Department one. So it's a joint collaborative effort.
Thank you, Siobhan. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks very much for this report. Looking through it, and it's actually the circular, there was only, I think, one relatively minor reference to bullying. I thought we would see that being called out a little bit more. Now, I do understand other forms of neglect are elements of bullying and stuff. So is this a nomenclature issue in terms of how we use the bullying, or is it subject to a separate circular and briefing?
Yep, we have a separate standard circular that relates to sort of bullying incidents and how we support, record and manage those incidents. So it's referenced in here, but the separate standard circular is the one that we use to support schools and staff around how they then deal with bullying incidents within settings and schools.
Thank you very much.
No, who was up first? Des, thank you.
Thanks, Chair. It's just referencing, Chair, the professional learning presentation on page 34 of the papers. I know that the standard circular itself is dated June 24, but we're obviously being brought this to committee today after the start of the session. So I was really just wondering, has that presentation been delivered in schools yet, or is it yet to be delivered, essentially?
We shared the presentation with schools over the summer holidays because schools tend to use the August in-service day to deliver the child protection training, as it's an opportunity where all staff are available, whether it be janitors, kitchen staff, PSAs, teachers, office, etc. So given the importance of this, we did share it during the summer holidays, and all of our schools used it in August and to support delivering the child protection training.
Councillor McCann.
Thanks, Chair. I think first to welcome the echo. The paper and the updating of it with UNCRC, because I think that adds to the weight of GIRFEC, it adds to the weight of the promise and everything that's included to that. So it gives that something much more solid, if you like, at the back of it, and I think that's a positive, very much a positive. I think it's great to see a lot of the work now coming forward on that. Can I ask, I've seen in some areas that I've been in recently, in some schools and some early learning centres, where we're starting to, teachers and staff are working with the children, telling them what their rights are, and there are posters, if you like, saying UNCRC, what it means for you, kind of thing, and the right to be heard, etc. And it touches on it. Obviously, we know that our staff are being updated, but I think the other side of that is to make sure that our children and young people are also aware of it, and that they have that trust with their teaching staff to ensure that they can go to them, that there is someone there who can listen, etc. And that's tied in within the document. But again, that's part and parcel of the professional training to ensure that all staff are aware of that.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, in our settings in schools, children's rights has been a focus for a number of years, and many of our schools have been working with UNICEF around rights respect in schools, and just recently a couple of our family centres have been accredited as rights respect in early learning and childcare settings. So it has been a real focus in terms of professional learning for staff, but also that pupil voice and making sure that children and young people are very much involved in understanding about rights, but also having their voice heard, and also being fundamental in terms of developing that across their setting or school. A number of pupil groups take on a sort of leadership of promoting children's rights across the school. I think there's something around that wider understanding, so not just about it being staff and children and young people, but also supporting parents and carers around their understanding. And just recently we have developed a dedicated site within the council website that's all around children's rights to support that and promote that wider understanding. And we are looking at sort of professional learning and raising awareness, not just within education, but the wider council in terms of that. But I think that pupil voice or children's voice is absolutely fundamental to this policy, making sure that they are genuinely heard and listened to, and they feel that they're able to speak and to share concerns because they will be listened to.
No, thanks for that, Siobhan, because I think that is vital going forward. And I think it's also vital, and you touched on it yourself, when parents come into the settings, whether it's to collect a child or anything else, I think it's right that they should see this is what's going on, and make them aware that there are a huge number of issues, and that their children have been properly made aware of all of these issues, because I think that's critical. Thanks for that.
Thank you. Councillor Buchanan, any other comments or questions? I think the timing is right, obviously, for this to come to us because of the changes, because of the recent legislation Councillor Buchanan was talking about, and obviously the key thing is the communication of it to all staff. And I realise within it, there's very much detail on how this is, in service days, I think, is a good example of when this is communicated to staff, because it is all staff, not just the procedure, but how they should act within it, and what they should do and what they shouldn't do. So it's absolutely key. There was one question that we talked about earlier, but what I think is worth talking about again, about who is within the senior team in the school, the actual child protection coordinator, depending on the size of school, whether it's just that where does the head teacher go in an instance where they need to possibly within the school discuss what's appropriate for a particular situation, or I've got a concern about a young person. Is there more information you could provide on that?
So within the guidance, there's sort of protocol that there would be a child protection coordinator, but there's also a deputy child protection coordinator, and that's to cover incidents where perhaps if it's the head teacher who's the child protection coordinator, if they're out at a meeting and something happens, there's somebody there that can deputise to deal with that. So there is that level of support in terms of that. We hold, one of our quality improvement managers holds regular child protection coordinator meetings throughout the school year. That's to offer updates around guidance, provide support, share resources. If there's been a learning review or a case review nationally, sort of sharing the learning from that. So again, that's a route that child protection coordinators have that support from the education department and myself, obviously, if they do have a concern that they wanted to talk through. I'd mentioned earlier around partnership working, and that really is key. So within a setting in our school, if the child protection coordinator had something they wanted to talk through, they weren't quite sure, is this a child protection concern, is this something I should be raising? We have a very close working partnership with social work, so our schools are very, in settings, are very well versed in contacting requests for assistance, just to ask for a bit of advice or support before potentially going down a formal route. So there's various ways that child protection coordinators would be supported.
Great, thanks, Siobhan. Just actually, keyword there that you mentioned also partnerships, so that's within the education context. But again, I believe we talked about just to make the committee aware of there's partnerships out with education and with the council as a whole. And you talked on social work, but I think as well so the committee understands about who does what when, and who takes the lead in certain situations, whether is it the school or social work or others.
So if a child were to disclose a concern to the school, the guidance provides sort of set things that a school should do in terms of listening to the child, not putting words in their mouth, not asking leading questions, etc. The school would contact social work, and then at that point social work would take the lead, and they would work with police around deciding whether there needed to be a joint interview, who would be involved in that and the process to go, and education would then be a partner within that in terms of working in collaboration with them, supporting the child, working with family, but social work at that point would take the lead in terms of decisions and moving forward in that sort of joint partnership with police and health.
So is there instances where, I think we can talk about this as well, the police and it needs to be them at first?
So that would be if there was an incident that was perhaps out with school. So if police were called to a house where there's a child in residence, they then have to contact social work to raise that with them, and social work then often would contact the school to say there's been an incident, is the child in school today, do you have any concerns, have you noticed a change in behaviour, etc. So again, it's that kind of sharing of information where appropriate in line with GDPR, but also sort of working together to make sure that sort of wraparound care for the family and the child is put in place, and the people that need to know are aware so they can offer that support.
Great, thanks, Siobhan. Is there any other questions or comments about the circular? The one key word for me about this actually emphasises the reassurance. I think that we all want to have, whether it's Education Committee or externally, that the partnerships are there and the sharing of information. And the key thing, obviously, ultimately, is to protect the young persons, who may or may not require our assistance or care. Sorry, wait. The purpose of my PC's shut down. I'm just checking Yeah, we're asked to approve and comment on the revised standard circular, and then ask the Director of Education to take appropriate steps to ensure its implementation in all schools. Are the committee happy to do that? Great. Great. Thank you. And so, if you go to the agenda then, Mark. Yes, so we move on to the last item now, agenda item 6, and this is the Education Department NGO report from 23-24, and this is Graham. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Convener. So the purpose of this report is to update and advise committee of the NGO report on the performance of the Education Department across 2023-2024. By way of background, members will be very familiar with the Education Department's approach to ensuring continuous improvement across the whole department. Indeed, it's been referenced a number of times this morning so far, with obviously regular reports and presentations provided to this very committee on various aspects of our performance, both at a departmental level, but also at individual establishment level as well. In addition to the various reports that have been presented over the last year, a number of which are detailed in paragraph 3, members will also recall the reports that have been considered on Education Scotland inspections over the last year, with head teachers of Barhead and St Luke's High Schools and Kirkhill Primary School having joined us to celebrate their successes in terms of what they receive from Education Scotland. Obviously, in addition to these reports, and as we've noted as well, inspections undertaken by the Care Inspectorate of both Glenwood and Overlea Family Centres have also highlighted sector-leading practice, again demonstrating that strong performance at all levels within East Renfrewshire. In terms of the purpose of the NGO report, members will note that the information provided relates to the Department's contribution to the Council's overall outcome delivery plan. For this year, a number of new activities and indicators have been included in the Department's contribution to the ODP as part of a wider refresh. And to align with much of the work already been undertaken, we have sought, where possible, to link activities and indicators with the existing strategies and plans that we have across the Department. And therefore, much of what is reported in this report may already be familiar to members or will be reported in other reports as well. So it's kind of bringing everything together in one place. If I can just draw members' attention to one particular point, and I'll remind people of this every year when presenting this report, in terms of the information presented within this, it's just to remind people that this is a 23-24 sort of organisational year report, and so it relates to April 23 to March 24, and therefore is out of sync with the academic year, which is obviously how we would normally report much of our information. It's therefore, for that reason, the majority of the performance data contained within this report actually relates to the previous 22-23 session, so there can be a wee bit of, particularly when you're hearing the SQA report, for instance, earlier on, it can be a bit of a mismatch in terms of the data that's often presented. Turning to the report itself, members will note that the Department continues to make very good progress in our work towards achieving our vision of everyone attaining, everyone achieving through excellent experiences, and with clear actions in place as we work towards the key priority of closing the poverty-related attainment gap. Paragraph 12 in the paper provides a strong list of some of the key highlights across a range of different measures and areas of work. Plus, I don't intend to go through the list, indeed wouldn't have the time to cover everything fully. Some specific notable highlights include the highest proportion of our school leavers entering positive destinations, East Renfrewshire being the highest performing local authority across attainment measures, the opening of the new Neilston campus earlier this year, and support provided by the Healthier Minds team in continuing to provide essential health and wellbeing advice and support to staff, pupils and parents, again with very positive evaluations. Given the strong commitment to continuous improvement as a department, it will come as no surprise that we're seeking to build on that strong performance, and paragraph 13 outlines the department's key priorities for the year as previously supported through the local improvement plan, with a clear commitment to continue to support our learners to attain and achieve at the highest levels whilst working towards closing that poverty-related attainment gap. So, in conclusion, this report summarises the performance of the department over the last year, specifically focusing on the contribution to the Council's outcome delivery plan. The report demonstrates the breadth of work being undertaken across the department, schools and nurseries, and seeking to achieve our vision and ensure that we can continue to deliver the best for our young learners across East Renfrewshire. So, Convener Committee is asked to therefore note and comment on the content of the report as a summary of performance through 23-24. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. We're asked to note and comment. Do you have any questions or comments from? Oh, wait, both at the same time. Councillor Wallace.
Thank you. Looking at page 64, It mentions number of exclusions per 1,000 pupils in primary and secondary, and I see there's no data available for this year or for the most recent year. It'd be valuable to know what you feel that the trend is. The reason I ask is that, you know, what lies behind these exclusions? Disruptive behaviour? Is it violence? I mean, media would have us believe at the moment that violence against teachers is at an all-time high, and it's something that these are numbers that used to come before us at Audit and Scrutiny Committee a number of years ago. For one reason or another, it was removed from the report on health and safety, and I appreciate with IGIB and whatnot, occasionally what will come up with the teaching unions. Is this a trend that we need to be concerned about in East Renfrewshire? And if it is, what are we doing about it? Thanks.
Thank you. I'll come in there. So in terms of exclusions, I don't have the exact number to hand, but the number of exclusions has increased again this year. It's worth noting that still the lowest in Scotland in terms of exclusions. Reason behind exclusions, there are a range of different reasons. Most of them are around pupil-to-pupil incidents rather than related to violence to staff, and it ranges for different reasons. Some of it is around pupils having a fight with each other, some is around sort of bullying type behaviour. Some of them are related to vaping within schools, setting off of fire, so a whole range of different reasons behind that. We have been looking at a sort of a range of data, including bullying incidents, number of exclusions, violence to staff, and for the past year have had a working group led by one of our quality improvement managers looking at violence to staff and how we support our settings in schools, thinking around the support for staff but also the support for children and young people. And I know Des is part of that group who sits in that. The group consists of colleagues within the education department, union representation. We have staff from school, but a range of staff, so not just senior leaders. There's a teacher, a pupil support assistant, and also then health and safety and HR. Some of the work they've been doing is around trying to understand what happens if there's been a violent incident, how staff are supported and how their well-being is looked after and cared for, but a bit of unpicking and trying to understand the incident itself to see is there any learning that could be taken from that could hopefully either supports are put in place or different strategies are used in future that would maybe mitigate against the child becoming distressed to a level where a violent incident would happen. We've also been looking at behaviour in its widest sense across the authority, and I think we'd spoken before around violence to staff. I mean, you break down the figures, the majority of incidents involve children with additional support needs. So there's something about how we're including those children, how we're supporting them, and the skill of our workforce in terms of meeting their needs and recognising triggers, and looking at the environment to make sure the environment within our setting in schools is right in order to support children and young people. So we are at the moment rolling out a whole authority approach to inclusive practice called Circle. A number of different education authorities have adopted that, and we visited a few different authorities and spoke to some colleagues from other schools out with East Renfrewshire to understand the approach a bit more, and it is very much around looking at the environment and looking at adaptations that could be made to the environment, upskilling staff, understanding particular needs and how different children need support in different ways in terms of perhaps the relationship, the environment, where they sit in class, what the different stimulus around them is. That just was August, then Service Day August. We've trained up sort of training for trainer type experts in all of our primary schools, and they delivered training within their own schools during the August in Service Day. We will be providing support throughout the year to schools and then look to roll that out across secondary schools, and it's all very much around addressing relationships and behaviour in our schools. This year we will also, as part of the ASN, sort of subgroup following the ASN review, we did be developing a wider sort of behaviour and relationships action plan based on the information that's come nationally recently, and using the data that we have within our own context to work on looking at, we know with the circle, we know with this working group, what else do we need to look at in terms of continue to address that and support our schools and support our children and young people.
Thank you, Siobhan. Des?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it was really just obviously just on the back of what Siobhan was saying, and it really was just to confirm that in terms of the working group, Siobhan's correct. I have been involved in that, but I think it's important to point out as well that there's been a lot of collaborative work taking place, not just with the teacher unions, but local government unions. They've been involved in this as well, and there's been a number of meetings through the session which have been extremely productive, and I think the fruits of our efforts will be shared soon. But it's really just to confirm. I think everybody acknowledges that any incidents of violence at staff are taken seriously by everybody, and accordingly that's why this piece of work has been done.
If I could, just to confirm, you're quite happy that the department's taking as much action and preventative action as possible?
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Thank you, Des. Councillor O'Donnell?
Thanks for that confirmation, Des. That's very reassuring. Graham, excellent report as ever. I think the good news from an education committee perspective is that there's no surprises in here at all. It's all been very well rehearsed over the work of the committee over the last year, and that's where it should be. so well done. Another heroic effort from the department. Very pleasing to see. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Councillor Buchanan?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Again, just to echo the comments made in terms of the outstanding work that's been done. And as we are all aware of it, this is the last report, the culmination, if you like, bringing together everything that we've seen over the course of the last year. So that's excellent, and it's been well received. I think another note just on the behaviour in schools. Just last week, the launch of the National Guidance for Behaviour in Schools, and including mobile phone guidance, etc. All aspects of behaviour was launched. And that's over a 3-year period, and obviously everybody nationally will be looking at that to try and improve the issues that are currently ongoing and see how best they can be addressed. And there's a number of projects ongoing looking at that across the country. So yeah, they're very much at the top of the list and how we manage it.
Thank you, Councillor Buchanan. Any other notes and comments? With regards to the national guidance, actually, we discussed this earlier, and I think it might be helpful to do a summary of our approach as to in the context of national guidance to what we do and what we're already doing and have done. Is it possible, in relation to what we talked about earlier?
Well, we can certainly come. We can provide an update at a future point. We're still at that early stage. I mean, our schools are well placed, so the national guidance, particularly in terms of mobile phones, is about that, providing that appropriate autonomy to schools. There is no ability to ban national phones. That's not something that the Scottish Government has within its gift in terms of legislation. And that approach, that empowered approach within a sort of framework, is very much what we do locally anyway. I think it does pick up some of the themes, though, that we've mentioned throughout the meeting. So that focus on children's rights, that's at the heart of that. So any sort of approach that our schools are adopting needs to sort of take account of that. And I think there are sort of several issues, particularly around the mobile phone. Some relate to behaviour. So some of that is the driver, that if there's low-level disruption. But I think there's a wider issue, and for any of you that have not read it, I continue to recommend the book by Jonathan Haidt around the anxious generation. So there is a wider issue there in terms of how do we, as part of schools and part of that societal thing, support our young people, whereby some of that challenge of constantly having things buzzing at you, of those sort of social media challenges, how do we support our young people there, given the rise that we've got in terms of mental health issues and so on. And I think school needs to be part of that solution, and certainly Siobhan and I, we've got, as part of the directors' forums where I meet with the head pupils and the primary 7 pupil leaders, mobile phones is on our agenda. We had a discussion with the parent council chairs in May. Let's just say it was a fairly robust discussion. You know, again, parents wanting that support, and as a parent with 5 teenage children, you know, I can understand why they would be looking for that school support. But just banning phones is not a straightforward answer. We actually need to try and do that in a more nuanced and sophisticated way. So it's about working with our young people. But I do think there are opportunities there to try and make sure our schools are those environments where young people get that benefit of being face to face and are not having to constantly feel that pressure of online.
Thanks, Mark. Apologies for putting you on the spot there, but I thought it would be helpful in terms of the context of what we've just been talking about. Councillor Wallace? Thanks for that, Councillor. So, any other notes or comments on the report? No? Great, thank you. So, yeah, we have that's a recommendation is for taskers to note and comment on the content of the report, and I think we'll finish that. Great, thanks, and that's the end of the meeting. Thanks everyone.